Minister Malachi, I talk about how our right to vote, minorities and people of color's right to vote, is hanging in the balance. And we've got a 5-4 conservative Supreme Court with someone making a comment like Scalia, that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is a racial entitlement. There's some broadcasters that says, "What say you?" I don't know who he is. I forgot who it is, but what say you?
First of all, let me thank you for your comments earlier on and sharing your journey, your walk, and what that means, kind of putting it in perspective for where we are today and why it's important for this kind of program to take place. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 did not just happen just because of Lyndon Johnson being in office. I think it's very important to note that from the time of the Emancipation Proclamation, which we are moving to celebrate the 150th anniversary of, to the Reconstruction's amendments that were the 13th, 14th, and the 15th that you spoke on, to the rights of white women to vote, to looking at lynchings, to looking at grandfather laws, to looking at everything that brought us to that point, the riots, the marches on Washington's Bloody Sunday, all of those things to come to a place of consciousness for the leadership of this country, a place of consciousness for the country itself, that the fundamental right to vote is fundamentally a part of citizenship and the duty of citizens in this country to participate in. In the Voting Rights Act has been reauthorized 4 times. Twice in the 70s, once in the 80s, and it was interesting during the time that Ronald Reagan was actually elected, it became a distraction from the Atlanta child murders at the time. We moved to 2006. In 2006, Congress went through an incredible review of the laws. They looked at Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and they still determined that pre-clearance was still needed.
Let me stop you 1 second, because I want everyone to have this in full perspective. This is 2006. Under the administration of George W. Bush.
George W. Bush.
Not necessarily a flag-waving liberal.
Okay.
And at that time,
that's right. Yes.
At that time, the Senate voted 98-0.
Yes.
To keep it intact. Please proceed.
Overwhelmingly, exactly. Overwhelming support that it was needed in the 21st century. And so now we move forward where we have Shelby versus Holden. And the challenges that we see before, I have to put this as an activist, as an organizer. I appreciate that Shannon's here. I appreciate you allowing time for the voting right, to talk about the Violence Against Women's Act. All of this is connected to how we vote and who we vote for, how we educate people on the issues that are important, and then after we elect them, how we hold them accountable to those issues. So what's taking place right now is a kind of, for me, it's a how dare you. How dare you think that, first of all, you can use the word as entitlement when we have had people who have lost their lives. We have people still who are fighting. There's issues of indignity. There's issues still of fear, of intimidation in 2012. There are still some of the same things that you were talking about in your walk, in your journey, that young African-American men and women, that low-income people, that persons who were presumed to be, who are newly immigrants, who are new citizens to this country, have to face right now. The Voting Rights Act, and very specifically Section 5, pre-clearance, it has been determined that in those 16 states that they do pass laws that are very specific, very mean-spirited, cannot be understood as good public policy, but bad public policy, intended to deny, to hinder, suppress, disrespect, disenfranchise, disconnect citizens from exercising that right. It is still needed in 2013. We should not, the audacity is that we should not be talking about this right now. There should not be a need for reauthorization for something that is fundamental. When I was actually a part of the original advocacy for the Violence Against Women's Act, it should never have been an issue of reauthorization. There are just some fundamental principles in this country, some fundamental values of safety, of again, citizenship, of what it means to be a citizen in this country and to pursue the life, liberty, and happiness that should not come up for debate no matter who is holding office, no matter who is in the Supreme Court, no matter what the climate is.
You know, it defies good sense. It defies logic. It defies morality. Mm-hmm. It's an intellectual coup d'etat that must have happened with a Justice Scalia and those that might think like him, especially after the freshness of the attempts in 2012. Starting, let's just isolate 2012. Mm-hmm. State after state after state after state, and their efforts to overtly
is a good word.
Arrogantly right. Mm-hmm. suppress the vote. You've got that fool up in Pennsylvania saying the laws that how we're going to change our voting laws is going to elect Romney. Mm-hmm. And the flip side of that is because the people that would vote for Obama won't be able to register or won't be able to vote. That was echoed in Texas, in North Carolina, across these states where the Voting Rights Act applies. Mm-hmm. It was so very obvious. So to have a member of the Supreme Court, highest court in the land, to come out and say something so ignorant, so asinine, such that flies in the face of reason, where does that come from?
Well, that actually comes from white skin privilege, white male's privilege. That actually comes from someone who has been in a position for a long time and is really disconnected from the reality of what is happening day to day for American citizens. This is someone who is smart. This is someone who is in a position for life, who does not have to be concerned about whether or not in Ohio the lines were long for voting, who does not have to be concerned about in Florida the meaning of early voting and the meaning of Sunday voting and what that meant to the African American community. This is somebody who is about privilege and those that hear him, those that introduce laws, those that advance those kinds of laws, those are persons of privilege. Those are persons who right now who don't get what it meant to be 90 years old and to be denied the right to vote in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because your driver's license was different from your birth certificate, but you have been voting ever since you received the right to vote, ever since you were able to register. Where we are right now, Rocket, it is important that Americans, that everyone is, particularly because with People for the American Way, the African American Religious Affairs Program, what is important for us is to educate people on the importance of the courts. It is to educate people on the importance of not just the Supreme Court, but every court. Because this is a law that, when we look at Shelby versus Holder, this came up the pipelines. This came up through district courts. This was through the Court of Appeals. Every day I tell people you need to be registering, educating, verifying, protecting, and mobilizing people to vote, because the elections happen all the time. People that we elect, nominate, and they appoint. They are responsible for those persons who are in the Supreme Court who right now are making the decisions that have an impact on current generation, but generations to come. One of the things we do at People for the American Way that we have been doing for 30 years now is addressing judicial nominations and addressing fair courts and what they look like for people, for for Americans. What does that really mean? And so as we go forward from here, what is the lessons learned? One is that, yes, there should be voices from men, women. Everyone should be saying, we need to have pre-clearance, we need to have Section 5. That needs to stay. The second thing is we need voter registration modernization so that people can register, them registering and participating in every election, connecting the elections to the persons who will nominate, the persons who will appoint, those who sit on the benches. We've got all of, for example, right now, Rock, we've got all of these vacancies, if you will, that have to be filled. The pressure is, yes, to keep Section 5, yes, to make sure the Voting Rights Act is advanced, but it's a bigger issue than that, and you know that. And these are artists of distractions, and we cannot be distracted right now.